Hi everyone, welcome to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News Editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for tuning in this Tuesday afternoon on the Thanksgiving holiday week, and as we usually do, but we've missed her a couple of weeks with the busyness of the election cycle, check in with Jennifer Lawless, political professor of political science at the University of Virginia, Skyping in from an undisclosed location today. Jennifer, thank you for joining us.
Of course.
Well, you've been certainly busy since the elections, and now we're starting to see the dust settle a little bit, but some things aren't completely settled. Let's talk about Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. Is she really facing any challenge?
She's definitely facing a challenge. It's hard to imagine that she won't eke out a victory by a pretty substantial margin. The challenge, of course, is that if it looks like the Democratic Party is splintered, or if it looks like a substantial number of Democrats are not willing to support her, that could threaten her leadership, and it could also send a signal to the Republicans that they have room to sort of make a power play. So it looks better when the party is cohesive, and it looks better when everybody's enthusiastic about the leadership, especially when it's leadership that's taking over the majority.
Let's talk a little bit about that. Here in Providence yesterday, Jennifer, at Brown University, some students associated with Sunrise RI were outside the speech where Tom Perez was addressing a crowd here in Providence, basically calling on him and his role overseeing the DNC. Now, this pertains to what they had said they would not take fossil fuel contributions, and then flipped on that promise. Probably a couple dozen young folks out there trying to, again, have a public face, do some press. Do we see some even increasingly splintering? I mean, we see it with the pressure on Pelosi, but, you know, maybe of the Bernie crap vein, if you will, kind of sensing that there might be some opportunity to make some plays here.
I think we are seeing that. The irony, of course, is that they're going to cut off their noses to spite their faces. And what a lot of these groups need to realize is that for the first time in many years, the Democrats have an opportunity to put forward an agenda that, should the Democrats control the White House in 2020, could really be implemented. So now is the time to demonstrate the way they differ from the Republican Party and to highlight these huge differences in policy preferences between the GOP and the Democrats. It's probably not the best time to highlight relatively small differences within the Democratic Party, because we saw the Tea Party do that in 2010, and it just led to complete chaos.
So do you think they should be learning, again, those lessons from the Tea Party about this inter-party fighting?
I think nobody ever thinks of themselves as the difficult faction, right? And so it's important, I think, for the Democratic leadership to make it clear that they're willing to move in a progressive direction. They're willing to talk to all of these new members. They're willing to highlight what they want their vision to look like. But there also has to be some level of practical politics moving forward, or else they'll find themselves completely ill-equipped to deal with the 2020 electoral environment.
So I have to take this opportunity to tack to an issue on the other side of the aisle. Let's talk about the Senate as we know it before we go to the Mississippi runoff. But let's talk a little bit about criminal justice reform. Now, this was touted by some as being a bipartisan approach to the issue. Lindsey Graham press over the weekend said that there's over 80 combined votes. Mitch McConnell, a little deer in the headlight. So if this is truly a bipartisan effort, and this is something that sounds like could be achieved, why the holdup?
Well, it's a bipartisan effort in part because it's tiny and will make almost no meaningful difference at all. So Democrats have been pushing for prison reform and for criminal justice reform for a very long time. And certain libertarian groups, as well as the Koch brothers, for example, have also been pushing for this. The bill on the table would do almost nothing. It doesn't apply to state prisons, obviously. It would apply only to about 3% of the federal prison population. And what that means is a few thousand people's sentences would be reduced or cut because of drug offenses. So it's not to say that it's nothing, but in the broad scheme of things, the policy is quite narrow and the money that it would save is quite narrow as well. So why Mitch McConnell doesn't want to move this forward is actually beyond me. The only thing that I can think of is that he's anticipating that when the House is controlled by Nancy Pelosi, the Democrats will push for more meaningful prison reform, and he'll then be able to frame the debate as the Democrats going far too ahead of themselves, and, you know, that would be a way to get nothing. But, you know, Donald Trump has said, my pen is ready, I'm going to sign this. It doesn't make much sense to me as to why Mitch McConnell wants to defy quite a few of the more senior members of the Senate.
I mean, you can say what you will about Mitch McConnell. He's been a skillful leader for the Republicans in the Senate. I mean, you might have a little insight into the way his brain works being a political scientist, because that certainly sounds like it could be a rationale. But it was interesting, again, to see Lindsey Graham just making the case for it on Sunday. And, of course, Mitch McConnell having the brakes on it for now, so to speak. But let's take a look at what we're looking at around the country as well. Runoff in Mississippi.
This is one of these races that I think highlights that it doesn't matter what you say on the campaign trail anymore. Cindy Hyde-Smith, who is the Republican incumbent currently serving, who's seeking her first full term, was caught on tape twice saying that suppressing the vote is not the worst thing in the world in certain districts, and it would actually help her. And there doesn't really seem to be any backlash in Mississippi. And so it's hard to imagine a scenario whereby she doesn't cross the 50% threshold. And I think, it's really emblematic of a much broader problem in U.S. politics, which is that it's okay to do anything you possibly can to win.
Speaking of doing anything in politics, a very interesting piece of irony, a little news story this week about Ivanka Trump's emails and what she might have been using on her personal versus governmental devices. Just deja vu all over again, but on the other side of things.
And we're also not walking around chanting "lock her up." So, I think there is a bit of a difference here, and it speaks to the broader hypocrisy. If this was such an important issue to Donald Trump, and if he genuinely believed that Hillary Clinton had threatened national security and deserved to be in prison, not only for using a personal server, but also for not being fully aware of what she was doing, then it's hard to imagine how he can defend this behavior. Granted, Ivanka Trump is not Secretary of State, but she was transmitting information that probably should not have been transmitted on a personal email device, and there were security clearances that were breached. So, I think this also speaks to this broader idea of, well, it's okay if we don't play by the rules, but we're just going to hold everybody else accountable when they violate them. And it really, I think, makes it a lot easier for the Democrats to argue that the Trump administration doesn't think that it has to follow the rules and the laws, that it's been pretty harsh in terms of directing toward everybody else.
Staying on the theme of the Trump administration, the news that just came out today from D.C., President Donald Trump saying that he would stand by Saudi Arabia. Now, again, this is the fallout of the murder, the Khashoggi murder, and whether the Crown Prince had a role in it or not. It was interesting. We saw the president really take that pro-Saudi stance right away, sort of take that step back once some evidence was produced and more evidence continued to come out. And now we see him continue to be tethered to the Saudi government. Does this surprise you? But also, what does this mean for international relations?
It doesn't surprise me because we've seen this back and forth. The president also today acknowledged that members of Congress, many of whom are in his own party, think that he's not handling this well, and they would take a different position and think that there should be, more penalties and sanctions imposed on the Saudi government. As far as international relations are concerned, it's complicated because this obviously helps the United States with Saudi Arabia, but it calls into question a lot of other alliances that we have when we're clearly willing to say, you know what, we're going to let this one go. I think it also speaks to this broader issue of the president not necessarily placing freedom of the press at the top of his list. There's been quite a bit of speculation as to how he would have handled this if Khashoggi had not been a journalist. And at a time where he's treated journalists pretty pathetically, when he's called them the enemy of the people, when he's suggested that he can now write new rules for the White House press corps, his reaction helps push this narrative that he's basically been developing on his own, which is that he just has no respect for journalism or for an independent press. And I think in a lot of ways that threatens democracy more than the relationship with the Saudi government more broadly.
Speaking of the press, I do have a last little bit, a little interesting tidbit here from Rhode Island, Jennifer, that I want to bring to your attention and talk about. Yesterday at a RIPTA meeting, there was a journalist there, Steve Alquist, who was told he couldn't tape an open meeting. Now, he brought this attention to the ACLU, who raised the issue today. RIPTA's response was that they had, again, made a mistake, but they were going to ask any reporters moving forward if they wouldn't mind not taping the public comment period because people might feel uncomfortable. Is that in any way, shape, or form a viable suggestion?
It's a viable suggestion. It's not a viable policy to implement if anybody actually cares what happens at these meetings. Now, I understand that it's different to be a citizen who's engaging in direct democracy than it is an elected official or the head of an organization or a policymaker. But if you're going to voice your opinion or attend these meetings, you know full well that this is the way the process works and that getting your argument on the books is part of the process. And so, I'm very, very leery of any ways that any government or any, institution is trying to push back on open access to meetings, open access to information, and freedom of the dissemination of that information. And I'm probably more attentive to that now, as are a lot of political scientists, politicians, pundits, because we're seeing this pushback from the White House.
Again, it was an interesting piece of information that came to light yesterday that we're continuing to follow here. So Jennifer Lawless, professor of political science at the University of Virginia, we thank you for Skyping in as you do most weeks and wish you a very happy Thanksgiving holiday.
Happy Thanksgiving to you too.
Okay, thanks, Jennifer. And don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back with our next guest here in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News Editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for joining us here at the 4 o'clock show. Robin Del Sesto Garceau, thank you for coming in. As always, we appreciate it. With Robin Garceau, Interiors, you've been a busy interior design professional the last few weeks. You've been on the road, and I just want to go over a little bit about what you've been seeing at some of the shows that you've been to around the country, looking at national, international trends, and then we're going to get to a very practical matter.
Sure. I find it's very important in my industry to travel as much as I can to see as many trends and cutting-edge ideas that are out there, because in Rhode Island we tend to stay home a lot, and for me it's all about getting out there and really seeing what's on trend. Although I don't do trendy type design, you always want to know what's coming, what's ahead, so you're not staying trendy, you're actually designing forward for what is coming. I've been to High Point, which is an international home furnishings show. I go there twice a year. It's in North Carolina, the largest one in the world. I just got back from Charleston, South Carolina, and that was Southern Now, home style type design in a show house. I'll be back to Paris in January, and that's all real cutting edge, and probably won't be in the U.S. until, say, 2020. But it's really nice.
We got to get you to Skype in from Paris this year.
Yeah, it was truly amazing last year, and I expect it to be just as beautiful and wonderful again this year. And then after that, I'll go to Nashville for an antiques and garden show. So I tried to do a little bit of everything and really get well-rounded in all types of design.
And this must be a real asset when you have clients to say, tell us what's new, what's out there. I mean, they might have some ideas, but this just then broadens your, well, I saw this here, I saw this there. I mean, it must every year just expand your scope of potential, what is out there for folks who are looking in design.
Yeah, it totally does. And not only that, too, I've been scoping out products as well for clients who are looking for certain special pieces, maybe an antique from Paris, sconces, that kind of thing. I saw some gorgeous antiques from South Carolina in Charleston. So, and then I'll be in Nashville at that show as well. So I'm trying to integrate some of these pieces into clients' homes. And that's really interesting because it makes it very unique.
And so what are the things you focus, again, on the design side, but every time when you come in and we talk about something practical, I feel that I learn something, I know viewers learn something, because when they go through the design process, whether it's an existing home or a design build, there's really practical matters that need to be addressed up front before you get into the design portion of moving ahead with your new home. And today, let's talk about electrical and finding out what the capacities are in a house, and it really starts with the walkthrough.
It does. I've been on multiple projects over the past year, and to me, this is very, very important for you to be present on, because the electrical walkthrough is with the contractor or project manager as well as the electrician. So the three of you or four of you, if you have a spouse or whoever's in the home, you need to go through each thing. You need to know your lighting. You need to know your plugs, where the electrical plugs are going to be. And that's really what you do on this walkthrough. So you need to do your homework before the walkthrough as well, not just show up and say, you know what, I'm not quite sure, because they're there to get this done. And you need to be prepared to give them some answers.
And so let's talk about between an existing home you might be coming into, or again, that design build facet. Let's talk about if you're doing brand new construction. I mean, how involved should you be and where the placement is of particular electric, and having those conversations about what it is you're looking for? Because then we'll go into existing ones and what can be done in the realm of what currently is in a home and what you can do if there's some issues that you want to work around.
Well, brand new construction obviously is a little easier. You can design a lighting plan. You go in, you figure out where your switches are. If you're going into a room, you look at, okay, well, this is a perfect spot for a switch, or I always try to talk to the electrician and the project manager about window treatments and how they relate to switches, because a lot of times they'll just put the switches right near a door, like a sliding glass door, and you'll have the switches right there, which is fine. But then if you want to put draperies over it, now all of a sudden you're climbing behind the drapery to get to your wall switch, and you don't ever think about that. So it's really, really important to think about that when you're doing this walkthrough. That's one of the things. Another is with new construction, you're wide open to recessed lighting plan, you're wide open to pendants over your kitchen island, your bathroom light fixtures. So all of those fixtures, in my mind, if you can choose them before you do the walkthrough, you'll know the size, you'll know the placement, if a bathroom fixture is facing up or facing down. Some sconces you may or may not be able to fit on either side of your mirror where your sink is. You need to, some sconces take a smaller electrical box, and the electrician's going to need to know that. All of that is done with this electrical walkthrough. You say your kitchen pendants over your island. Are you doing 2? Are you doing 3? Are you doing 4? How big is your island? How far apart are they? This is all very, very important, so you need to be there. You need to be present, and you need to know what you're talking about when you're going through it.
Now, are you often there with clients?
Always. Yeah. I'm usually there on the electrical walkthrough, because a lot of times they don't, it's you know, the contractor and the electrician, they do this every day, but the homeowner doesn't do that every day. So sometimes the contractor or the electrician is used to doing things. Like I said, they'll put the light switches next to a door, and they're not thinking drapery. They may say, okay, well, I know there's a plug that has to go every 3 feet or whatever code is in your backsplash in your kitchen, and I'm like, please don't cut into this gorgeous tile that we just picked for the backsplash. You know, she's spending all this money on tile for your backsplash, and they're putting plugs all through it. So I like to kind of change it up, maybe add an electrical strip underneath the cabinets? Do you need under cabinet lighting? So there are a lot of things that you have to think about that they may not think about, and that's why I'm there.
To help them. But as in you said, really kind of the golden rule is really have a good sense of design for each of the rooms ahead of time so that the electric isn't dictating what it is that you're looking to achieve, but you have that vision and can work around that. Any other flags or things to look for with electric that you advise folks on?
Well, whenever I'm doing a walkthrough, I want to concentrate on, do you have enough lighting in a space? So I'm working on a project, and he just doesn't like a lot of light. Well, we do not have enough lighting in this room, and I try to say, look, we need more, and it's going to be quite dark in there. So you need to think about, okay, recessed cans. How much lighting do you want in a space? What about your bathroom? Well, maybe you can put some recessed cans up in a soffit, so you coming over your sink instead of, say, an overhead, or you can drop you can drop pendants down on either side of your mirror instead. And that's another thing you have to think about when you're doing this, mirrors, which you don't ever think about until later. But how big is your mirror, and where is the light going to fall over the mirror in your bathroom? So if you don't have those things chosen, you can't say, yes, we need to put the box right there. And sometimes they can run the wires through the back and pull them through as you go, but you really need to know, like I said, you need to know what's going in there first.
And I guess another portion of it too is if you do things maybe even after the fact, there's a cost associated with it.
Oh yeah. And that's been done too. And if you're going to move things, and a lot of times things happen, but if you're going to move something, be clear as to where it's going to move. So on a project I was doing, we said, well, you can't have that plug right over the sink, because now you can't put the mirror there. And that's a lot of times I run into that as well. They put a plug and there's nowhere to put the mirror because it'll cover the plug. So I said that has to be moved over to the side. Well, they moved it over to the side, but in the back of a vanity cabinet tower, and they cut right through the back of the tower. So, these are kind of crazy things that you wouldn't expect, but they're all things that you really need to pay attention to, because this is what costs the extra money afterwards. It's a whole lot easier to do it when you're in the new construction phase and when everything is open, rather than, oh, all right, now everything's done and we have to move that cable box, we need to move that plug or the light switch. It becomes much more difficult.
And speaking of money, you just got a little bit of free advice from Robin Del Sesto Garceau as it pertains to electrical when you're thinking of interior design. Appreciate your taking the time to come in, tell us about your trips around the country and the world. We look forward to hopefully getting you when you're in Paris. And want to wish you a very happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Okay,
happy Thanksgiving.
Thanks so much. Don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back with our next guest here in the Navigate Credit Union Broadcast Center. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for joining us this Tuesday of Thanksgiving week. I'd like to welcome in a guest who we had probably just about this time last year. Andrew Schiff, Executive Director of the Rhode Island Community Food Bank. Thank you for joining us today. I appreciate it.
I'm glad to be here.
We had on GoLocal this week the status report on hunger as the organization puts out every year to give a snapshot of how things are here in Rhode Island. A couple of statistics if you hadn't had the chance to see that. Food insecurity impacts 1 in 8 households in Rhode Island. And this issue of hunger is the most prevalent that the food bank has seen in its reporting in the last 10 years.
That's right.
So talk with us a little bit about these numbers. Did they surprise you?
I think everybody's surprised by the numbers because the economy in Rhode Island is thriving. So at a time when unemployment is 3.8%, that is remarkably low. And there is pressure on wages. People are seeing wages increase. Why would there still be so many people struggling?
And so, there's a number of facets that you looked into that in particular, but one of the big ones is inflation, with rising food prices not being on par with rising wages.
Right. The high cost of living in Rhode Island is reflected in housing costs, rent, in energy costs, particularly fuel, and in the high cost of food.
So let's talk a little bit. You've been doing some press about this, telling folks about the status report on hunger. Obviously, there's 2 areas that you look to, especially for assistance, the federal level and the state level. Let's talk a little bit about the Farm Bill and Congress and how what happens in D.C. can impact what happens here.
So the Farm Bill, that is the federal legislation that authorizes SNAP, the food stamp program, actually expired at the end of September. And the House and Senate tried to come up with their own versions of a new Farm Bill. The Senate pretty much left SNAP benefits as is. The House decided to cut $20 billion out of SNAP over the next 10 years. And we really oppose those cuts. It'd be very harmful for Rhode Islanders. Right now in Rhode Island, 159,000 people are enrolled in SNAP.
And I'm sure you follow what happens in D.C. Very closely, and of course, when we're at a time of looking where things can be addressed from a financial impact, the rationale for cutting $20 billion over the next 10 years, where do they think that assistance for these folks who are in need of assistance is going to come from?
That is not a question that anyone is asking. No one's asking what's going to happen, but I can tell you what will happen. Folks will end up having to go to food pantries and meal programs. So that would be a giant step back from where we are.
And here at the state level, you've talked about addressing such issues as the minimum wage and others as well. Let's talk a little bit looking ahead, especially at the 2019 General Assembly session.
We're looking for an increase in the minimum wage to $15 over time, gradual time. What we feel is that hardworking Rhode Islanders should not receive a paycheck that leaves them living in poverty. We're also asking the state to fund some new initiatives. There's a wonderful program called Bonus Bucks that helps SNAP recipients to double the value of their SNAP benefits at farmers markets.
Okay.
So it's a win-win. It helps low-income families. It also helps Rhode Island farmers. We think the state can really help to boost that program so it's available to more people.
So yeah, talk a little bit about that. How long has that program been in existence for? But you said you've seen results so far.
Yeah, so this is a program that's actually run by Farm Fresh Rhode Island. They've had grant money to run the program and piloted it successfully for the last couple of years. It's really shown that people are interested, they want to take advantage of that, and at a time when we're seeing that SNAP benefits don't really cover the real cost of food. This gives people an opportunity to stretch those benefits and helps them get healthy food.
So look, let's talk a little bit about the report, released before the holidays. Oftentimes we know the holidays are a focus, especially of folks from a generosity, a giving perspective, but it's really that year-round look that you have to take a look at here in the state. Talk with us about the state of the community food bank right now, and both the holidays and what we can expect through the year.
People have been very, very generous to us. We're lucky we get, support from across the state, from individuals. Half the money that we raise is actually from individuals. We also get support, obviously, from corporations and foundations. And we're able to immediately use that support to bring in food to be able to, help so many people in need. Right now, we're serving 53,000 people across the state each month.
Okay.
So the need is really still significant, and we ask people each year to step up. Fortunately, this is a time of year when our cause is top of mind. Thanksgiving week is often a time when people think about what we do, but as you just said, we need help throughout the year. And so it's really important that we do well in terms of getting public support now so we know that we can do our work all year round.
Anything else you want folks to know, Andrew, while we have you here in studio? Again, we've got those numbers. We have the report up on GoLocal Prov, but really wanted you to come in and talk about it, and especially that proactive way, looking again at Congress, looking here in Rhode Island. But anything else viewers should know, readers should know as we have you here in studio?
So one thing is, please read the report. It's on our website, rifoodbank.org. It gives you a look at where things are right now in the state, and I think it gives a really good view for people who may not know that much about the issue. The other thing is, there's nothing better than coming to the food bank to learn about our work. Everyone's welcome anytime, but there's a particular day on Saturday, December 8th from 9 to noon. We're having an open house. Most of the time, little kids aren't able to come to the food bank because we have machines and machinery and stuff like that. It's not really safe. We make it safe on that day for the open house so families can come with young children and get a tour of the food bank, get a sense of what we do, volunteer, help us out. It's a great day.
And so is that a good day, again, for folks who might want to give, might want to learn more about opportunities throughout the year, really sort of see what it's all about?
That is it.
Okay.
Come visit and learn about what we do.
Well, Andrew Schiff with the Rhode Island Community Food Bank, I appreciate your coming in. We'll, again, provide that link to the report, which is currently on the Rhode Island Community Food Bank's website and GoLocalProv.com, and we'll continue to bring you news throughout the year. Andrew, thank you so much for taking the time to come in.
Thank you.
Don't go anywhere. We're going to be back with our last and final guest here in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News Editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for tuning in this Tuesday afternoon. It's been full of politics, design, how to help Rhode Islanders in need, and now we're going to tack to theater. Vince Petronio, the director of Butterfingers Angel, opening November 30th at the Barker Playhouse. Thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I appreciate it. We have to give a special shout out to Steve Hugg for making sure that Vince gets in here to talk about the show. But before we even get to the show, please introduce yourself a little bit to viewers about your role at Barker and being a director.
Sure. This is my fourth show that I've been directing at Barker. They're a wonderful group located on Benefit Street, and they are the oldest little theater in the United States. Back in the day, it was Barker and it was Trinity primarily around here. And then over time, Barker, their attendance got down smaller and smaller, and within the last few years, they're working really hard to build up their clientele again. And hopefully the show will bring a lot of them in.
So your fourth show, what lured you to direct shows at Barker?
I've acted in the semi-professional theaters around here for about the last 15 or so years, 20 years or so now that I think about it. A lot of years at the now defunct Second Story Theater. But I had avoided directing for a long time until about 4 years ago, and I said, you know, I think now I have something more to offer. So then I started looking around for things to direct, and a friend who was a member of Barker suggested, hey, why don't you think about proposing to Barker a show? And the first show I directed at Barker was A Philadelphia Story. And it went really, really well. And like I said, this is my third one there, and now I'm trying to get back to get my feet on the stage, but I've been having so much success directing in recent years, I haven't been able to get back there. But we're still working on that.
So let's talk about that directorial role, if you will, for the average layperson who doesn't really know how plays are chosen and casted.
Yeah, well, as far as this one in particular, I also teach a scene study and acting class at Barker, both in the fall and in the spring. And this play in particular, Butterfingers Angels, actually I was in 10 years ago at Second Story Theater where I played Joseph. And anyhow, in this class I had a young girl, Phoebe Brown, who was also in the cast of The Philadelphia Story. And then she was 13, now she was 16, and there was another young boy in the class. And I says, well, I remember that opening scene from Butterfingers Angel. So I gave that to them, and they did such a great job that I thought, all right, that's what I need to do. So for this year, I pitched the Butterfingers Angel at Barker because it says, I know I have my Mary in Phoebe Brown.
Youth is served.
Oh, yes, absolutely, absolutely. And she does such a wonderful job. She and Roger Lemlin, who plays Joseph. Now, here's the thing. Now I played Joseph 10 years ago. And my thought going into directing Joseph, Roger playing Joseph, was not to do what I did.
Is it tough to do that, to get outside yourself a little bit?
It can be, especially if it's a role you've already done. You know, you're hearing the lines and you're hearing your own voice in your head. Roger has done such a wonderful job of it. I've had no trouble whatsoever disassociating myself from that role. So he's done a great job. But as far as casting is concerned, you know, you have a cattle call, you have everybody in the community coming to audition, and you slowly narrow it down, and then it's a matter of who do you think is going to work best, and especially if it's someone you've worked with in the past. Well, then you feel a little bit better because you know what you can get out of them. And I'm sorry, but having worked with Phoebe and having worked with Roger in the past,
you knew it.
They were, yeah.
You knew it. You had it. Well, you need to tell folks while you're in here a little bit more about the play.
The thing about the play is, you know, it's the Butterfingers Angel, Mary and Joseph, Three Kings, and the Slaughter of 12 Carols. That gives you some idea. It's written by William Gibson, but who also wrote The Miracle Worker about Helen Keller. But this is his different take on the Christmas story, and it is both funny and solemn and hilarious and chilling. The way I generally describe it is at the very beginning of the play, the angel comes down from heaven and sees Mary and goes up to Mary and tells her, you are going to give birth to the Christ child. And Mary's response is, I think you got the wrong Mary. There are a lot of other Marys in my neighborhood. And that gives you some idea of the take of the play. But in addition to it being funny like that, there's a lot of solemnity in it, a lot of Christmas carols. There is a character called the Man in Gray who really represents the dark side. And he appears in 3 different incarnations throughout the play. We have the 3 kings, we have Herod, and we have the angel. So it's really basically the story of Mary, the angel, and Joseph.
And how many seats does this theater hold?
Oh, gee, that's a
Oh, am I putting
question.
you on the spot? You're like, I'm not the numbers guy.
Yeah, I'm not the numbers guy. I just want them all full, you know?
Is it intimate, would you call it?
Yeah, I'll tell you, the thing about the Barker Playhouse, where the Players exist, it's one of the finest venues for theater in the state. It really is. There are so many other little theaters that would give their eye teeth to be able to work in this venue. So it's an absolute, it's a proscenium, which you would expect, padded seating, and a handicap accessible, thanks to a grant from RISCA for this past year. But it's really a beautiful theater. It's an old theater. Originally it was a church that was then turned into a theater, I want to say around 1909 or thereabouts.
Right there, it was Benefit Street, comes sloping down towards Wicked in there. Now it opens up on November 30th. How long's the run, Vince?
So it runs November 30th and the 1st and the 2nd, and then the 7th, 8th, and 9th. So on Friday and Saturday nights, the show starts at 7:30, and on Sundays, it starts at 2 o'clock. And with an intermission, it'll be a little less than 2 hours. So it's a nice, relatively short play, and it's okay for the whole family. I have 2 young kids who are about 10 years old who are in it, because we also have talking animals. A talking cow, and a talking sheep, and a talking dog.
How have you left us to this point in the interview that you have talking animals?
It just comes to me late, right?
So it is a family-friendly affair?
It is definitely a family-friendly affair.
Okay, very good. Anything else folks should know about Butterfingers Angel or the Playhouse?
I think you want to truly, if you haven't been to Barker and the Players at Barker, check it out. A lot of people don't even recognize that it exists. And yet, like I said, this is the 110th season for this little playhouse in Rhode Island. So I really hope you think about coming, seeing the show, and if you like it, become a member. And basically, a member means you buy a season ticket, and that's a ticket to every show. And it's a very family-oriented place. They love parties. They give all kinds of parties, including, you know, formal dress parties. And of course, my acting class. So I hope you really think about coming to see the Butterfingers Angel at Barker.
Well, Vince Petronio with the Barker Playhouse, I appreciate your taking the time because I'm sure you're just a little busy getting ready for opening night.
On my way to rehearsal right after
Scooting right back up the hill here. So, Vince, thank you so much for coming into the studio.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you for tuning in on Tuesday of this holiday week. We appreciate your watching. Be sure to check in with GoLocalProv.com over the evening and on Facebook as well. And we'll see you back tomorrow on Wednesday here in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News Editor Kate Nagel.